So I'm going to start with a few disclaimers. I'm not here on behalf of the school district. What I will present is not something that's approved or given to me by the district. I picked up a lot of pieces of information. You're going to see in the next slide what I picked. The fact that it's not official information from the district doesn't mean that it's not true, what I'm going to share with you. I'm not going to convince you to vote for or against anything. I will at the end share my thought process, and I'm actually going to share with you how and why I will vote the way that I will. The information sources that I have, 2 meetings with the committee, one of the committee co-chairs, Rick Sinclair, to understand what happened at the committee. And by the way, this whole thing started when one morning I woke up and I turned to NBC and they said that Plano ISD is issuing a $1.5 billion bond, and I was like, wait, what? What just happened? I never heard anything about that until that point. Next thing was that Pat reached out to me and said, do you know anything about that? That's when I started looking into it. I had 3 meetings with the Plano ISD CFO, Johnny Hill. One of them actually included the superintendent. I observed 2 of the meetings, the August 2nd and the August 16th. August 2nd is when the committee submitted their recommendation to the board, and then the August 16th. I read the agenda packets. I actually took some content from the agenda packets, and I'm going to put them up here. Documents received from the CFO. I asked the CFO I had a few questions during those meetings, between those meetings, and I asked for more information, so he gave me information. In fact, the last piece of information I got about 2 hours before I came here. The website for that's a great website that PISD has. Every district must have it. This is a financial transparency, so a lot of financial information. Some of it is not the latest and greatest, so board meetings typically have more up-to-date information. The legislative website, and you're going to see why I go there, and the district policies, and there's something funny that I found over there. Now, I had several questions that I started my process with. The first one was, if we did $500 million bond in 2016, and now 6 years later we're doing $1.5 billion bond, is it fair to say that every 6 years we're going to expect a bond that's 3 times bigger than the previous one, which means that by 2034 we're going to have a $13.5 billion bond? That's question number 1. And what do we really need? What does the district really need? I mean, we're not just going to let it. By the way, kind of I'll jump to the end. No, that's not what we're going to expect. How exactly are we paying a $1.5 billion bond with the same amount of dollars or the same INS tax rate that we did a $500 million bond 6 years ago? How can we all of a sudden pay 3 times as much when we know that the INS rate is actually lower than it was in 2016? The bond interest rates, now with the feds keep raising their rates, the interest rates that we have to pay on bonds is higher, and it's 3 times the amount of debt that we took in 2016. Another question that I ask is, what am I paying? Me, Yoram Solomon, owning a property here, what am I paying? What is it? How does that affect me? I mean, those are all great numbers, but there's an impact on me, and I wanted to know what it is. And then this whole balance between what's critical and what's discretionary. And you know, one of the propositions there might be on the discretionary side, and I'll talk more about that. How do I decide? So, you know, I have several factors. What effect does it have to students? We have 48, I think, something thousand students. Will it affect my property value? Sorry, no, I do care. The critical versus discretionary, how is the balance there? And by the way, different people see it differently. And I'm sure that if I'm going to ask you here about every little item here, some of you are going to be in favor of one item and against another item. That's a personal decision. And can I trust the information that I'm getting? And I'll touch on all of those. Actually, at the end, those questions that I gave you before, I'm going to give you what I believe the answers are based on all the conversations. The process of developing this bond, it started with an appointment to a committee. So as it turned out, in January, they did reach out to me and ask me to participate in the committee. They didn't say that it was bond related. They said it was facilities and district needs. So I didn't do 1 + 1. and that's on me. But regardless, I said I can't because my schedule didn't allow me to meet us to be in 6 of the 8 meetings that they scheduled. The district requests things. The committee rejected some of the things that the district requested, and you'll see how they made those decisions. They added something, specifically an event center. They did that based on scores, and you'll see they have in the district, and that's new, they have a scoring system for all the facilities. There are 91 facilities in the district, so they have a scoring system as to which one needs to be taken care of. Schools with under 50% capacity. You know, we have high capacity in, or we're at capacity in the absolute west, absolute southwest, absolute east, not so much in the center. We have schools that are at 50% or less. Even when I was at the board, I brought this up and asked at some point, do you think that you're going to be closing schools? Because if you have 2 schools that are at 50% capacity, why not merge them if they're in the same area? So that's a consideration that they're making. Then there is, of course, an event center. We'll talk about that. Board vote, the board then votes to move this ballot to the voters. Now, you remember in 2016, I was probably the first person in Plano ISD's board history to vote against bringing a vote, putting a vote, a bond on the ballot. I was very clear back then that it's not that I'm against something, I'm against everything being bundled into one, when what you have is a performing arts center that's holding everything else that the district needs hostage. And that was not something I was willing to do, and I voted against it. Would I have voted like the rest of the board? The board voted unanimously, not anonymously, unanimously to push this to the ballot. I would have voted with them for a simple reason. It comes out in 5 propositions. And the one thing that to me is kind of on the discretionary side, I want to let people decide. You decide. You want it, you got it. You don't want it, you don't have it. I would have voted the same way that the current board has voted. And I did ask them, a few members of the board were a little annoyed that they didn't have the option to vote on every somebody's Ring camera is working overtime. Somewhere. The board voted to, okay, so now you vote and you authorize the board to issue those propositions or to issue those bonds. The district issues the bonds. The current Plano ISD bonds, because of how the financials are in the district, because of the track record, they're ranked very high. But that doesn't mean that the projects are done automatically. The board has to approve the projects, every project specifically, and the board has limited discretion on how they can move money that they got through bond from one item to another. There's some latitude, but not a lot. And eventually, we, through the INS part of property taxes, or the INS part of the PISD part of property taxes, we paid the bondholder back. This was the number that was given. I don't think it's accurate, and I'll tell you why, because what it says is that all the projects that were considered were $2.2 billion. The committee rejected $750 million, which left them with 1.5. That's not exactly how it was, because they threw in a $130 million event center to get to the 1.5. So the district, either the district submitted something a little higher and the committee took down something like $880 million and then put in $130 million to get to those numbers. So this is kind of a high level. I'm going to go relatively quickly through these things. One, because I don't know the intimate details of every project. There are a lot of projects here, but I want to make sure that you have that, because that's going to be something that I'll leave with you. There are 4 propositions. The propositions change their names. There's also something that's called a voter approved, now I have an accent, voter approved tax rate election. in Proposition A. So everything moved one proposition up. So the general one, actually another thing that moved, they found that something in Proposition, what used to be Proposition D, athletics, had to move to Proposition A. So now Proposition A is actually $1.172 billion. That's general, I'll go through this. Technology, $173 million. The event center, 130, and the athletic is less than 27 now. I think it's about 19. Okay, so the major activities, one of them is Plano Senior High School renovation, $206 million. Haggard Middle School, they're actually replacing a building. They're tearing the building down and building it. I asked about some of the high dollar value numbers, and on that one they said that there's foundation issues and so on, and when they did the comparison, they decided that it would actually be better to just replace the building. Some other high school renovations, other things, smaller minor renovations, again in the senior high schools, other activities. As I said, I'm going to go relatively systems and compliance, not 100% sure what that is. But the thing is that there is detail. If you need the detail does exist at there is a bond website on the PISD's website. Still on that one, safety and security infrastructure, $40 million. What exactly does it mean? Again, there is detail. Technology infrastructure as opposed to technology for students, $20 million in equipment. Buses, $21 million. If I remember correctly, we had about $10 million in 2016, in the 2016 bond. CTE and innovative programs. So they're talking about building a career and technology center. So this is a new facility, building a facility from scratch. Not sure yet where, or at least I'm not sure where. Fine arts, still as part of the main proposition. By the way, the details on the left, those are the current precise proposition numbers. So this is Proposition B. Music, stage upgrades, and so on. There is part of athletics, part of it that came from what used to be Proposition D is now here. Plano Senior Athletics is, they have a little more parts there. Again, it's all broken into components. Some of the components, you know, kind of you get lost by the detail. There's a $12,000 thing here. This is Proposition C, so everything up until now was Proposition A, or I'm sorry, Proposition B. The Vader is now Proposition A. Proposition C is technology, mobile one-to-one. Every student has a computer, classroom multimedia. You know, I was thinking about that. Wait, we bought computers in 2016. Yeah, does anybody here still work on a 2016 computer? Not so much. So they do need to replace the computers. Classroom multimedia at $50 million and so on. Proposition E, that's this. I did skip Proposition D, the event center. I'll get back to it, trust me. Stadium renovation and turf. So the number one is a parking lot at Clark Stadium, and then turf. It's not only for that stadium, for other stadiums as well. Let me go back. So the one of the things that I'm actually proud of having been on the board was in 2019, because in 2019 I put a lot of pressure on having a policy that very few districts in the state of Texas have. There is a number for it. It's called CCA local and CCA regulation. And this is a policy that is created to deal with debt. And the funny thing is that they moved it to, they have a new system. All the policies are being held by the Texas Association of School Boards website, and they moved it, and I checked, and this is what you get when you look for CCA local in Plano ISD. You can find one for Austin. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say that they did that on purpose to eliminate the CCA local and the regulation that we created, but that's just a glitch in the system. And the CFO really, he didn't know what to say when I told him that CCA local does not show up. So he's working with them to find out where it got lost. It just in the last, I think, month, they moved to another system. But I do have those policies. So just in case they really, really lost them, I have the original text. And the important part is that the debt management, this is the regulation. The policy itself is really just 2 pages, and it says you're going to create regulations that control how you hold bonds. One of the important parts is, with mortgages, the longer you take them, the more you're going to be paying in interest. Well, this policy, one of the things that it did was you cannot take bond for longer than 20 years. By law, you can go, unless you decide to limit it yourself, by law, you can go up to 40 years. In plain ISD, they will never go beyond 20 years, which means that, there's a limit to how much they can take, and there's a limit to how much of what the INS part of property taxes will go to interest as opposed to the to paying back the principal. So one important part of it is preserve public trust. Complete debt programs. The next page is one of my favorite ones, because the thing that I was pushing for is that a bond should not be something that out of the blue we need. And if you look, for example, at the periods in which we had bonds, there was a period where I think they issued bonds within 2-3 years, one after the other, then 8 years with no bond, then another 8 years, then 6 years, and it seems kind of haphazard. And so the whole idea of this policy was that we actually know what we need. The district actually knows what it needs, and bonds fall out of what we need. And that was what I pushed for, and this is what this policy is about. So I sat with the CFO and I asked, what do we need? Is it going to be in 6 years we're going to have 4.5 billion, and 6 years after that we're going to have 13.5 billion? What do we need? What does the district need? So we started looking at it, and some of it is a little more predictable. Unfortunately, the biggest one is less predictable. And I think the best example is the second question I have. How much am I going to spend on my house? How much capital am I going to spend on my house over the next 20 years? Anybody can guess how much they can spend on their house? I can't. And the timing of this meeting is perfect, because just yesterday I hired someone to work on my foundation. I will edit this out of the video. I hired somebody to work on my foundation because, and I didn't expect it, but there was a crack somewhere and they checked, and there's foundation issue. I had someone come in and do something on the sidings in the back of the house. You need to resurface the pool. You don't know what it's going to take, and unfortunately, that's the biggest part of the district, things you don't know. So I asked, do we know how many facilities we have? We do, 91. How do we estimate how much money does it take to maintain 91 facilities? So it's actually simple. You can assume relative, call it a major, include everything, a major renovation every 20 years. And when I say a major renovation, it means also smaller things within the 20 years. We have 9.24 million, I almost said square miles again. We don't have 9.24 million square miles. We have 9.24 million square feet in the 91 facilities. Right now, it costs about $275 to do a major renovation, and kind of amortized over some time. Multiply the two numbers, what do we get? We get the cost of facility renovation over the next 20 years. And that is the big one, and you'll see, because I did kind of a hypothetical chart on the next one. Every 20 years. A big question is, what's the actual condition? I mean, if I decided that I'm going to be very organized and I'm going to resurface my pool every 20 years, exactly every 20 years, 20 years from now, if my pool doesn't need resurfacing, guess what? I'm not doing it. And if it needs that in 16 years from now, then I will do that in 16 years and not in 20. So the actual condition is important. Then the big question that very few people want to talk about, are we going to be closing schools? Because if when I was on the board, we had 55,185 students. Now we have 48,000. And the projections keep showing this declining. And if this is declining, do we still need 91 facilities? I have to say that was one of the things that I kept talking about back in 2019. In my conversations in the last month or so, I started hearing the district talk about that without me prompting it. So that's facilities. We have transportation. So, transportation is, again, very simple. 48,000 students. How many buses does it take? Typically, a bus lasts 12 years. PISD maintains them such that it would last 15 years. Times the cost of a bus, you know how much money we're going to spend in 20 years. Technology per student plus facilities. There's technology for the students, there's technology for the facilities. The projector you're looking at here is a facility technology. My laptop is a student technology. And on one hand, the cost of technology goes down. On the other hand, we bring more technology. So I assume that to be roughly flat. Athletics, anybody here cares about athletics? No? Nobody? Well, then I'm not the only one. But, again, there are other people outside that do care about athletics, and I know that half of you do. And then fine arts. So, I don't care much for fine arts other than the fact that I do have a drum set, a piano, a synthesizer, an electric guitar, and my daughter has a few others. So I like music. I like fine art. Some people do, some people don't. That's part of education. Those are the 5 major categories: facilities, transportation, technology, athletics, and fine arts. So what I did was I said, let's break out the numbers. This is not coming from the district. This is, for me, this is hypothetically, I'm taking 9.24 million square feet in the district, times 275, divided over 20 years. Then on top of it, I have safety and transportation and technology and athletics and fine arts. And what I got was $3.3 billion. The cost of renovating Plano ISD facilities is $3.3 billion over a period of 20 years. That's where bonds need to drop from. Not exactly, because things might cost a little more. Prices do go up, and I'll talk about that. So especially price of renovation will go up. So I assumed 2% growth. So I took what 1 year would be, the $3.3 billion divided by 20, that's 1 year. And I assumed that it's going to grow by about 2% every year. Is it going to be 2%? Is it going to be more? Is it going to be less? And then on top of it are all kinds of special projects. For example, Performing Arts Center. For example, Event Center. Those are not included in maintaining the facilities. So if we will do that, we'll put that on top of it. I got to $3.5 billion without the special projects. Without special projects, then I expect that we're going to need $3.5 billion over a period, or the district will need $3.5 billion over the next 20 years. Once again, I want to remind you, those are my numbers. This is not coming from the district. Nobody in the district will say that's the number. But in my meetings with them, they started seeing where I'm going with that. Because I was asking these questions. How much does it cost of all the things that we finance with bonds? One thing the district did start doing is a scoring system for all the facilities. So this is the first page, this is the last page. The first page, now one is bad, one is the next facility you want to do a renovation on, and 91 is the last facility you want to do renovation on. So if you look at, this is post the 2022 bond. So assuming all the projects in 2022 bond, the current bond, are done, then what you see there in the top left, those are the next facilities that will be required, and they are assuming it for the 2029 bond. So, the next thing is that this is the first time that I heard the district starting to talk about, okay, so we have a guess of when the next bond is, and when the next bond is, because now we know what the expenses are. This is an example of their projections for the 2029 bond. This is coming from them. So, again, all those facilities that you saw in the top left, Those are the facilities. This is multiplying, or this is just the square footage, multiplied by 275. That gets us to about $500 million. Add all the other things that I had in my stacked chart, and you would get approximately $840 million bond in 2029. This is the first time that we even get to hear a number of the bond, the next bond in 2029. And then they just estimated, and again, the problem with that estimation is what do we know about the real facilities, the real state of the facilities in 2029? We don't know. So they estimated, I think they did like 2% a year or something like that to get to, we're estimating in 2036, 1.03 billion. This is, by the way, that's the 2% that I used, because of that 2%. I use that to calculate that growth in the needs. And then in 2043, probably $1.27 billion. So this is how we're assuming what the district is going to need. Now, one important thing is, even though the district is issuing $1.5 billion, doesn't mean that they're going to use all of it in 2023. So this is their projections right now. They took all the projects. I mean, you know, if you decided that this year you're going to renovate the pool, do the backyard, do the front yard, do the foundation, do the roof, and do a whole bunch of things, it's just not feasible to do that. So this is how they're breaking it out for the next 5 years. How do we pay for it? Average homeowner market value is 508. Average taxable is 409. That's a scary number. You know why it's a scary number? Because that means that there is a big buffer that goes way beyond the exemption, the homeowner exemption or the over 65 exemption between those two numbers. I know that for me, there's 29% difference between those two numbers, which means that next year, I may be paying 10% more. If they keep the same tax rate, next year I'm paying 10% more. The following year I'm paying 10% more. The following year I'm paying 9% more, unless the value of my property went up a little, which means I'm going to pay even more. So that's something to keep in mind. Total taxable right now is just under $60 billion. And so back to that question, how can you do it now? How can you fund a $1.5 billion bond with the same amount of, the same rate? Well, one of the reasons is because property values went up 50%. So even at the same rate, the district already collects 50% more. This is a slide that was shown in the, during that presentation that the committee actually made to the board. I had an issue with that slide. I have a major issue with that slide, and that issue is it shows a line that says 0.2374 INS. It's actually 23735 INS tax rate, but it shows a flat number in dollars, which is not going to happen because I know that I'm going to be paying, if this rate stays the same, I'm paying 10% more next year, 10% more the following year, and 9% more the year after that. I know that. So you can show me this. And I had that discussion with them, and for the first time I saw something that looks like this. Now I can tell you, I can almost guarantee that slide, that chart did not exist. And when I said I have a major issue with the previous one, they started working, they started doing the planning. What this shows, it's a little hard to see the blue on the left, but the blue on the left that you see kind of ways off, that's the current debt that we have. This is how much of it is going to stay through 2036. On top of it, gray, this is the current $1.5 billion bond. On top of it, forget the red for a second, on top of it in yellow is the 2029 bond. On top of it in, again, blue is the 2036 bond, I think. 2037, something like that, bond. That's the next one. So you notice one more thing, and that is that they're starting to raise that line. All of a sudden, it's not a flat line in dollars, but that line goes up 2% year over year, not more than 2%. What this means is very simple. The INS tax rate is going to have to go down. So every year, we're going to pay a lower rate 2% higher dollars. And I get the 2% higher dollars because, you know, the cost of construction, which I think I'm going to show you in a slide or two. Now, one other thing that I want you to notice are my two little notes on the left. This chart is coming from the district, but the two little notes there are coming from information I got from the district before they make the next payment on the current bond, on the previous bond. We owe, or the district owes, $490 million. After that payment, and before they start issuing the new debt, it's actually going to be $361 million. When we took the 2016 bond, we owed $800 million before we started taking it. After the last payment, we owed $800 million. So if I go back to my question, how can we pay $1.5 billion bond? Well, one, properties went up 50%, but the second thing is our starting point is $361 million and not $800. I'm going to talk, you know, Pat asked me to talk about the VATR to the voter-approved tax rate and tax rate election. So I asked a few questions about that. I got this. This is the tax rate over the last several years. One thing I can tell you, the one line to the left, the one that says 2015-16, I was on the board. The tax rate was actually higher. It was 1.44 something because the INS was 27.8 cents per $100. Then that year we actually took it down to 26.9. You can see that it stayed 26.9 until now, and now it's going down to 23.735. The INS part, and I'll show you why did that happen. Considerations for the future bonds, I told you about the $275. So I went to the CBRE's website, and what I found there was that in this year, they expect the growth. I mean, look at last year, 2021, the increase in cost, mainly because of materials, was 11.5%, 14.1% this year. But they're hoping that next year it's going to start going back to the 2.5% rates, which will make everything a lot more manageable. I mean, if materials and labor keeps on going up at the 14% rate, then we have a completely different problem in our hands. But I don't believe that that's going to stay the same. Now, hopefully I'm not going to offend anyone when I'm going to tell you what I hear every time, and I said that in 2016, I said this now. Every time somebody says, we're doing all of this without raising the tax rate, what goes through my head is I did not have a sexual relationship with that woman. Wasn't a relationship. My statement was true. I kept saying that in 2016, I keep saying this now, and I really, really urge the district, stop using this phrase. My property value is going up 10%. You're telling me you're going to keep the same tax rate? I'll go even a step beyond. The first reaction that I get to this is people are not dumb, they understand it. When the committee submitted their proposal to the board, twice they said, we're not raising the taxes. Forgot the word rate. So that is confusing and it's inaccurate, and to me, that's a major problem. When you're telling me something so that I'll think something, I have a problem with that. And we had that discussion, and you know, I can only be hopeful that this is not going to be a statement that they will use. So now what we're assuming is we're assuming 2%. And this is what the CFO assumes. The CFO assumes 2% increase, not in percentages, not in tax rate, in dollars. And by the way, one of the things that I tell people is, how many of you have an app here that you do your banking with, right? When you open your app, does it show the numbers there as percentage of the value of your house, or does it show it in dollars? It shows it in dollars. So I want to know the dollars. The dollars are going to be 2% higher. 2% higher is not 10% higher. And for that, they're going to have to start reducing the INS tax rate. Or one other thing that they can do, if this 2% all of a sudden gives more than they really need, they can start paying back the debt early. And when you pay it back early, you know what happens. You pay less overall in interest. The key is to maintain a pragmatic needs plan, not let the district, the board, or anybody else get completely, a runaway, all kinds of projects because we have the money. One thing, this is a slide that I got from them. They highlighted this circle, this ellipse that shows where the Collin County tax rates. This is the total one, and it shows that Plano, this is after this election, we're going to be the second lowest. I highlighted the one next to it, that's the INS, because INS is what is used to pay the debt. 23.74, 23.735 is actually the lowest in Collin County. Now, again, I'm not trying to sell you anything. You decide what you do when you go to the voting booth. But when I look at this, the thing that goes through my head, paying debt, I'm paying as a citizen, and this is, I told you, I care about what I pay. I pay the same amount on a $500,000 house than I would pay in any one of the top 5 for a $250,000 house in debt, not the rest of it. Talking about the rest of it, that's another interesting issue. I had recently I had an interesting interaction with Drinda that from Houston is still involved with us, and I even promised her that I'll send her a video of this. So this is for you, Drinda. Drinda made a statement. She said, "I'm done hearing that schools need more money. I'm done hearing that." I said, "I agree." Here's the problem we have. The problem we have is that the district collects property tax. Part of it stays here. Part of it, due to Robin Hood, goes to the state. What the state is supposed to do with that is pay for education in districts that don't have enough properties to tax to pay for the number of students that they have. Well, if you look at these numbers, 2016-17, what stayed in the district was $411 million. What stays in the district next year is $217. What went to the state in 2016 is $105 million. What's going to the state this coming year is $248 million. By the way, I was on the board on the column to the left, which was $50 million. The state took $50 million. So now, to be fair, yes, this number barely grows, but the number of students declined, right? So I took the number of students. This is the number of students from 2015-16 decline, going all the way to projected 26-20. You can see the numbers are going down. You know, we're in the 49,000 now. So I normalized it, and here's what I got. What stayed in the district actually increased 2% every year in the last 6 years, from 411 million over 54,000 students versus 418 in the next school year over 49,000 students. That's an increase of 2% every year, a total of 12.7. What went to the state was an increase of 15.4% every year, a total of another 136. Is there any place in the state of Texas where the cost of education has gone up another 136 or 15.4% every year that we have to pay for? Something is wrong there. Now, House Bill 3 created the term voter-approved tax rate and tax rate election. What they said is this is the formula for school districts. It's different for cities. And what they said is the tax rate that by definition we all approved. We were never asked, but we approved that they can go up to the no new revenue maintenance M&O, that's the 418, times 1.08, which is another 8%, plus the current debt rate. That's where the district can go next year. By the way, what they're not saying here is what part of it the state is actually going to take. So this is coming straight from them. What the district has done, the reason for the decline in the INS rate from 26.9 cents to 23.74 cents is because they knew that they're going to be losing 9 cents. 6 cents if we approve the VATR, 9 cents if we didn't. So what they did was they reduced the INS and they moved part of it to M&O so that they can live within that tax compression, which means that only 6.1. Here's an important part. What we're currently paying for this school year, the school year that ends, for the last school year, I'm sorry, 21-22, we paid 1.32. This was the tax rate, the PISD tax rate. Proposition A, before Proposition A, they can go as high as 1.22 or 1.23. So that would be 9 cents less. If we vote for the VATR, it's going to be 1.26. We got to keep in mind that they have already moved 3 cents just to make sure that that number would work. And my favorite topic, an event center, $130 million event center. To clarify the difference between, wait, we just built a performing arts center, what exactly is an event center? How is it different? It's a different setting. It's for different types of events. It's 8,500 seats. This is, I remember when I started on the board, we did a graduation in the Dallas Convention Center. Then we moved to the Star Center. Now they want to build an event center. The district didn't ask for it. The board didn't ask for it. This is something the committee came up with. So keep that in mind. Here is another one. I would like to take credit for this one for when I voted in 2016 against the bond because they didn't separate things out of the main, what was critical. But you know, nobody really asked me. They did that, and what they said is, if you're submitting something, a proposition, a bond to the voters, you have to take out these 6 things. One of them, number 4, is the performing art facility. So if this existed in 2016, the performing art facility was going to be on a separate proposition, which is what I was exactly fighting for. But look at number 1. Number 1 is the construction, acquisition, or equipment of a stadium with seating capacity of more than 1,000. This is why the event center is not going to hold the rest of it hostage. What am I going to do? Or here's what I'm thinking about the Performing Arts Center. It's 8,500 seats, stadium-like. It was added by the committee. It's $130 million. Now, I kept asking, one of the questions I asked is, how much do you need from me? So, well, $130 million. I don't have $130 million. What do you need from me? And it took a while until they understood what I was asking. And I really asked, what does it mean? What does the $130 million event center mean to the average homeowner? $6.14 a month. I'm not saying this, you know, it's so easy to say, hey, it's just a Starbucks and a half every month. That's not my decision to make. That's every person here needs to make that decision. I just want you to know what it means. One of the things I loved about the Performing Arts Center when that was brought up was that we're going to build this $70 million, $69.55 million Performing Arts Center to save $45,000 we have to pay in rent fees. The break-even is in 1,300 years with no interest. But then I asked, how much would it cost to maintain it? Because that facility doesn't maintain itself. How much does it cost to maintain? So the current estimate, because that facility is not open yet, the current estimate is about $300,000. The estimate for this, based on an equivalent in Garland, is $3 million a year. And if we're playing math to try and make sure that the district has enough to, in the M&O, the last thing I want to do is take out $3 million. But wait, Garland manages to get $2.4 million by renting that facility. That's great. Anybody here who is involved in finance, you know that the expense, you're going to be very accurate on the expense, not so much on money coming in, on income, on revenue. So that's the other thing. It's still $600,000 in the hole. I still don't see the $2.4 million coming in. So to me, it's $3 million in the hole right now. The district is still in litigation over the Performing Arts Center because there are cracks and so on. I'm glad nobody made fun of, who was it, the facility with the stadium with the crack? Allen. I'm glad that nobody at Plano made fun of them for cracks in the facility. So this is still in litigation. Enrollment is declining. This is, again, I'm not trying to talk you out of voting for it. If you want an event center, there is an event center on the ballot. For me, with all of this, with $3 million that I know we're going to spend out of M&O when the state keeps taking more and more away, for us to take $3 million ourselves, still in litigation, we're not done with the Performing Arts Center. Enrollment is declining. This is the kind of things that I would do when enrollment is going up and we're trying to get more people in here. The prices in Plano are making it almost impossible for anybody to come in here. Or at least people with young kids. And so enrollment is expected to decline. So is this the time to build the Performing Arts Center? One other thing is traffic. Of course, traffic is not going to be a problem if they're going to build it, Howard, in your backyard. But I don't know where they're going to build it. And so if it happens on my backyard, I may have an issue with 8,500 people coming in several times. And you can guess that if they want to make $2.4 million in revenue, this is not just going to be on graduation day.
You know what, just curious, the Performing Arts Center that was built, what's the seating in that?
1,500. That one, it's a different type of venue. The Performing Arts Center is like for concerts. So, you know, everybody's sitting theater-like. This one, everybody is sitting all around. So it's a stadium-like. I don't know. That's just me. Now, you remember I started with the questions. I'm almost done. I started with the questions. I would have been done earlier, but they seem fascinated or sleepy. So these were my questions that I started this process with. If we did $500 million in 2016, are we going to expect, and 1.5 now, are we going to expect? Well, the district really needs 3.3 billion or maybe 3.5 billion, excluding special projects over the next 20 years. So no, we're not going to have that. Plus, the district already gave an estimate, a ballpark, and it has to be ballpark because, again, there are a lot of variables, things that will change until they actually decide what's needed. How are we exactly paying $1.5 billion with a lower INS rate, higher bond interest rate, and 3 times the amount of debt? Well, property values went up 50%, already told you that. The starting point is $361 million and not $800 like we started 2016. And there is a 20-year max that we have now that we didn't have in 2016. What will I be paying, really? I can only tell you what they told me. They showed that they're planning on, in dollars, for the numbers to go up 2% every year. If this is what they do and it goes up 2%, and fortunately now, you know, if it goes beyond that, it has to be on a ballot for us to approve. So we do have a little lever there. 2%. So now I know, wait, my property is going to go up 10% next year, 10% the following year, 9% the year after that. But really what I'm going to pay for INS is going to be 2% higher. Critical versus discretionary balance. I told you that I'll tell you how I plan on voting. And I say plan. And the reason I say plan, because the election day is in November and things may change for better and for worse. So I'm telling you what I'm planning right now. As of today, I will vote yes to the VADR. So property taxes will go down from 132 to 125 percentage to PISD. I will vote yes on B, which is the $1.172 billion for the the main, let's call it the critical things. I will vote yes on C and E, fine arts and athletics. I am planning on voting no on D. Again, I'm not trying to convince you to vote no. You make your own decisions. Which leaves me with the last question. Do I trust what they tell me? When they use, and I made that statement, and I don't care that they're going to see this video too. I made that statement. Don't put a second grade young girl to tell me we're doing all of this with the same tax rate without raising the tax rate, because I told you what goes through my head when I hear that statement, and I don't want this to come to my head when they say it. So the way I decide whether I trust what they told me or not, competence. I'll start with competence. I sat with the CFO. I trust the CFO's competence, period. I mean, I had 3 meetings with him so far. I trust what he tells me. And you know what? I'm not an expert on a lot of things. Trust is actually one of the things I am. Process. I followed the process, how the process took place. Were there glitches in the process? I saw a few glitches. I noted a few things, but I didn't feel that anything was done to deceive or anything was done unintentionally. Values. Do we share the same values? In terms of fiscal responsibility, you know, a lot of the numbers, and I didn't share some of the insights that he gave me. Like, for example, what does he assume that the tax rate, that the bond interest rate is going to be? He's assuming between 5.5 to 6%. Right now, every financial analyst is assuming that the Fed is going to continue on raising their rates up to March of 2023, and it's going to be 4.3%. At that point, he's assuming 5.5 to 6%. So to me, he's covering his bases. He's being conservative fiscally. Then we get the point of critical versus discretionary. That's a personal decision. I mean, there are people here in this audience right now that are going to say, I would love to have an event center. Fine, I'm not one of them. But that's a personal decision, so I can't challenge them on that. Transparency, I push really hard, and only the time between now and the election is going to tell whether they're going to share even inconvenient information. They already shared inconvenient information with me. Some of it they haven't developed before I asked for it, but they were open with me, they were transparent with me. Hopefully this is going to be how they communicate. At the end, it's my vote. What I want them to do is I want them to trust us with giving us the real information and let us make our decision rather than manipulate us. I don't think that they're doing that out of, anything evil. I think the reason they're doing it is because that's how it's been done, always. This is how we do things around here. And I really am glad personally, having those meetings with them, that they were changing things. Information that I got here was information, some of the information was information that didn't exist before I asked for it. And they had to create it. And we're looking at it the first time with me. And don't be misleading. That's what I have. I'm sorry, I know that it took longer, but I know that it's also a lot of information. Any questions?